So Titleist new GT280 just launched, kind of not a mini driver, 2-wood. What's the tech and is it relevant for you? So we're going to do a little bit of a run through of the tech that's in this head. Now they've pulled together some of the best tech from the driver and the fairway, and that's really the key to this head. Callaway, TaylorMade are talking about mini drivers. This is a 2-wood. It's very much not just an off the tee club. It will fall into that category for some players, but for others it's going to be a fairway wood. So it's essentially kind of sits somewhere between replacing your longest fairway wood, or it's for someone who just wants to take driver out, to turn it into a kind of shorter, more controllable club versus the driver to put in play. So it kind of serves both purposes, and that's really why Titleist are calling it a 2-wood rather than a mini driver. So how is it different? The other mini drivers are bigger. This is a 280cc, so when you compare it to, got GT4 head here, if I can hold it properly, you can see the footprint size is really quite different. So 280cc's, you go back a number of years, and that was where driver head sizes were. Again, compare the face sizes here. You can see there's a significant change, a difference in the size of the head. So that is part of what makes it better off the fairway. You go too big in the head, and what happens is the strike point essentially gets low on the head. You're not going to get it high enough up the face off the ground to get effectively kind of CG behind the strike, and you're just going to see it spin up. It's going to come off dead from a spin point of view, or not launch. So hence going smaller in the size helps that. But what they've drawn in from the driver is they've got the thermoplastic crown. So it's that PMP material which allows them to save weight and move internal weight to positions which is more important that they're in. Essentially, you don't want a heavy crown, that draws the center of mass up. So they've been able to put some weight forward for high ball speed, so it's really kind of good on ball speed, but then back for a little bit of stability. So it's moving it around the head to give the properties that we're looking for from this particular product. And so that's really where, from the driver side of things, also in the fairways, but originating the driver, that thermoplastic crown really saves some weight, allows them to move the weight around the head to wherever they need it to be, and also stops them having to make the head too big in order to get that weight separation and weight distribution. Next, we're looking at the adjustable weight. So you've got a front-back weight distribution. So we've got a 11 gram as standard in the back and a 3 gram as standard in the front, which can be switched around. Now this is again where it's looking at off the fairway versus off the tee. If you're somebody who wants to use it off the ground, then moving the weight back makes it a little bit more stable, lowers the center of gravity just a little bit, but also adds a little bit of spin and flight. So for someone looking for it as a fairway wood, then that really makes it a little bit more stable, and a slightly friendlier flight gets it up in the air a little bit more. If you switch those weights around and put the heavy weight at the front, you're moving the center of gravity forwards. Slightly better for ball speed, but if you're looking for more of a driver type club, just in the smaller frame, then that's going to reduce spin. So that makes it more of a going, flatter flight, more run out distance, potentially makes it a bit low off the ground, certainly makes it a little bit less forgiving off the ground, but that then allows you to get the head, along with the adjustability on the sleeve, into that lower launching, lower spinning driver type club, weight back, moderate launch, moderate spin, a little bit more forgiving fairway type club. So that adjustability there gives some real versatility to the club. What we also have is the L-cup face. So this is the transition of the face plate essentially moving into the sole plate, which basically takes out the join at the bottom of the face. Now if you put a join at the bottom of the face, it's a weak point. Weak point means it flexes. That also then adds spin. So it increases ball speed low at the face, so it's less of a weak spot, but helps to maintain that lower spin, stronger spin, and therefore distance profile to it. Ultimately, low strike means high spin and generally loses ball speed, but this mitigates that as much as possible. So that's the L-cup face there. And the other aspect that they've done is they've just softened the profile, the roundness in the sole. This has got a flatter sole to it. So they've lowered that leading edge a bit to make it better off the ground versus the driver. I'll do a visual comparison on that shortly. But it's a flatter sole. So you're getting more of the sole tight to the ground, which means it's easier to get it up the face, easier to get from a launch and spin. So that comparison from a sharper, tighter leading edge to the ground, which is better for off the deck performance, but flatter bottom end, which means more of that club head is going to get into the bottom of the ball and help you flight it. So what we're going to do is do a bit of a dynamic test with weight back off the tee and then off the ground, and then flip the weights and do the same test off the tee and off the ground, and just then compare what the data does, what that change in weight does from a flight point of view and a feel, and then what you can expect to see from it as well. So we're going to start off the tee, make life a bit easier for me. We'll get a few shots with each and then switch it around. You know, it's a very classic Titleist feel. That's one of the aspects of the thermoplastic crown. They can really tune that sound in to keep it a very, you know, Titleist sound and feel, i.e. Sort of solid feel, nothing tinny and harsh out of it. Really kind of solid sound out the head. And certainly to hit with, you know, for a head of this size, actually feels pretty stable. So part of it is a shaft length. Due to the slightly longer hosel than you get on the fairway wood, a 43-inch fairway shaft, and this head would come out 43.5. So standard length 43.5, 43 3/4. It does sit in that halfway house. And what I found testing a few shafts in it, for me, the shaft sits halfway between as well. Now for some players, the driver shaft setup might suit well. Others, a fairway shaft might suit better. But for me, it's actually slots pretty much straight in the middle. A little bit low on the face, but didn't feel a lot of twist out the head, which was nice. So I think for after that, we'll put it on the ground, do a bit of a comparison, but it's very stable for a head this small. Normally, when I'm hitting something this size, it's an old school driver, and then you notice every little mishit going. But actually this, particularly off the tee, we can get it up the face a little bit, felt really pretty good. So we'll change over to off the deck, get some shots there. Right, so quite a tight lie here. Now there might be fairways that people play off that actually make it slightly friendlier than this surface, because the ball doesn't exactly sit up on it very much, but we've got a bit of give underneath. And so it does sit at that low leading edge. You really can see sat into the bottom of the ball, which is quite nice. So whilst it's a tall head, it doesn't look overly foreboding. Okay, so I've potentially gone to help that in the air a little bit, hence I've cut it up and gone right. So see if I can avoid trying to help it in the air. More of a solid move. Again, does pick it up pretty well. I can feel that I'm catching it a little bit lower on the face than off the tee, but it hasn't really lost any ball speed, which is good. It doesn't feel like that bottom head strike. If you hit a driver off the deck, you can really almost feel the head kind of kick back a little bit. Whereas this actually, again, it's designed to be hit this way, but it does feel pretty sound off the ground. So I managed to get that up the face a little bit, slightly toe side, but yeah, not unfriendly off the deck. So that's with weight back, that's in the most stable position. We'll flip it around, do the same test, and compare the data. So if you're new to the channel, you're enjoying the content, then check out this video. We just had the Masters. We've got what's in the bag for Rory and Justin Rose, looking at a contracted player versus non-contracted. Hopefully you'll like that. So we switched the heavyweight to the front. So in principle, this is now set up to optimize performance off the tee from a distance point of view. So that weight forward needs to spin down a little bit, and in theory a little bit more ball speed, very slight. Slightly low on the face, but you can feel a difference. It's a slightly more solid feel. So when that mass is sat right behind the face, it's right there on the back of the ball, and so it is a little bit more of a solid feel at impact. Makes the club swing very slightly differently when you're moving 8 grams back and forth, differential in weight. That does make a bit of a difference to the way it moves as well. So I tend to find weight forward, I can square up a little bit more easily, but definitely feels a little punchier off the face. It'll be interesting to compare where the launch and the spins are, but certainly for me it's easier to just bring that toe around and square it off a touch more. Yeah, it's a bit of a different sound. It's a slightly higher pitched note and slightly harder sound off the face, but that's courtesy of our weight getting a bit closer to the back of the ball where it's right at the front. So you know, a bit of a stronger shot. Certainly, say that gearing of the weight, moving it back away from the tip of the shaft, actually creates a little bit of a, for some players who like me, you transition open a bit, that weight is less than the driver's, but helps to gear it open slightly. And for me, weight forward actually helps you square it up a bit more. So we'll go to hit them off the ground and see if it's hard work off the deck or if it still picks it up well. So weight forward, playing it off the ground, in principle makes it a bit less forgiving, and whereas it's optimized for off the tee, in theory this is now going to make it a bit harder off the deck. But you know, I think based on what we've seen from it, it should still pick the ball up quite well. It's just where it takes the spin to, and for a lot of players it's whether that, if it drops the spin too much, does it make it a little too knuckly as well. Never going to help if you chunk it, that's for sure. I might ignore that one for the data. Yeah, you can definitely feel it's got a little bit more twist if you don't quite catch it, whereas weight back felt like it clung on and it didn't really move too much. You know, that one, it's gone straight, but I knew it didn't quite strike it and just felt a bit more distortion of the head of impact. Not a huge amount, but a little bit more. Yeah, and it's interesting, it feels like the contact is slightly lower on the face. It feels slightly thinner as a strike. So it almost feels like you've got to get the club into the bottom of the ball a little bit more, whereas weight back felt it collected it a little bit more easily. So you know, certainly a little bit of a difference in how easy to use off the ground it is with weight forward. And that one I've absolutely nuked. So definitely weight forward off the ground is noticeably a little bit harder to, you've got to be that bit more exact with the strike point to get that ball up the face, to get that kind of contact, that solidity of hit that I got in the last one. Weight back, it felt much, much easier to collect and pick. So it'd be fascinating to see where the flight and the spin differences are now. So you're going to run through the data on the screen here, going to start comparing the two back weight positions, ground and tee, and then the forward weights, but then compare forward and back off the ground, forward and back off the tee. So there'll be a few screens we're going to look at, but on this one, let's start with the back weight. So what's noticeable here is actually how stable between the two the spin rate is. So you know, you're generally going to find, you can see the tolerance number here, a little bit more of a tolerance off the ground than off the tee, to be expected because the strike point's harder to achieve. But off the tee is going to be a bit lower because you strike it slightly higher up the face, and that gears spin off. But we're looking at 300 revs, so really not a huge amount. Launch angle also still really pretty good off the ground. So off the deck, the back weight is helping just generate a little bit more launch, and face angle's a hair more open, so I'm just adding maybe a little bit more loft. There's a subconscious thing about getting it in the air there, but off the ground, 0.2 of a degree in launch, 300 revs of spin, really quite consistent. So that shows actually how stable with that weight in the back it makes it. If we switch to the forward weight position, what we can see here, launch angle is noticeably a bit lower, degree and a bit lower, but the spin differential off the tee here at the bottom versus off the ground is 700 revs difference, so over twice the difference, which shows actually how much that lower strike point off the deck is affecting the performance of the head when you strike it off the ground. It's making it that much harder to get the optimum strike point to really get spin. And there was one off the ground, I got the last one, which I absolutely nutted, which would have helped that data come down a little bit more. So the average is 700, but actually we've got a wider tolerance. So the differential between a really good hit and a moderate one is going to be a little bit bigger with the weight low than it is with the weight forward than it is with the weight back. So again, really optimizing the performance off the tee because that's a lower, flatter, stronger, more boring ball flight. But you are compromising yourself off the ground just that little bit. So we're now going to switch. We're going to just move the screen around and just compare back weight, front weight, off the ground, off the tee. So I've slightly switched the order around so that it makes sense when I open some of the data up. But, so we can see at the top here, the back weight off the ground, forward weight off the ground at the bottom. So as I've hit more shots, the swing speed's gone up a little bit. So that's where the baseline club speed up slightly. But actually you can see with the forward weight, the ball speed is high. So it's a little bit more efficient. Now, one of the shots off the back weight was slightly toe side, which dropped a bit of ball speed. But actually, weight forward in principle means higher ball speed. So that holds true across the board. But we can see off the ground, there's not that much of a differential on spin. Launch angle's down 1.5 degrees, but the spin's only down 150 revs. Now that's courtesy of that strike point. So that low strike point on the face is more effective with the weight forward. It produces a bit more gearing, adds a little bit of spin versus weight at the back. So that stability of spin relative to launch angle, which will be different when we switch to the tee shots, it makes less of a difference to spin rate off the ground, but more of a difference. The launch angle is the main bit of difference here. Angle of attack, I felt like I've got to get the club into the bottom of the ball, so angle of attack's very slightly down versus very slightly up. So that's part of where the launch angle changes, but it's also that feeling of having to get the club into the bottom of the ball that makes me squeeze it a little bit more to ensure strike gets up the face a touch more. Otherwise, it's the same head. It shouldn't be huge differences, but for a couple of miles an hour ball speed, 3 miles an hour ball speed, there's roughly 8 yards in total, that flatter flight chasing out more, but there's only 5 yards carry differential. But definitely harder to use off the ground. Now, if we switch around to, I'm going to put the off the tee options in here. So off the tee, what we can see here is a similar 1.3 degree launch angle differential. So it's still down that a little bit more with the weight forward, and the loft settings are exactly the same, I hasten to add. But spin rate, 500 revs difference. So we're seeing here a 100 rev to 500 rev difference. So off the tee, where we're getting the strike higher up the face, it's showing a bigger proportionate difference on spin. So 20% of spin difference. So what that results in is there's a slightly higher club speed. So some of that distance is going to be gained through the ball speed going up. 4 miles an hour, looking at kind of 7 or 8 yards. We're still seeing another 7 yards of total difference. So carry, broadly speaking, we proportion the distance back, broadly speaking the same, but there's more chase out. It's a little bit of a flatter, more going ball flight, so therefore into a bit of wind, or as a total distance club, that weight forward position has most certainly flattened that spin down and given that little bit more chase on. So there is a notable difference from that weight shift. Now, if you were to moderate the weights, this is with an 11 and a 3. If you were to moderate that down and lessen the weight differential, then you're going to lessen the difference you're going to see between the launch and the spin and the strike point. So, and obviously if you get parity, then there will be no difference whatever you do with them. But the closer you make the two weights, the more you moderate the low spin for the weight forward and the high spin and the stability for the weight back, and you'll find that sort of middle ground. But you're also meaning, whichever way around you put them, it's a more minimal difference. So by putting a maximum spread of weight, you can make the biggest difference to ball flight, forgiveness, stability, and then make it more of a off the tee or off the ground, more specific club. So the more differential you make it, the more exaggerated the difference. And certainly what we've seen here, there's really quite a strong difference between those two. I'm going to go back to one thing I mentioned earlier, which was the off the ground performance. And as I open this screen up, the two should sit a little bit, I was hoping we'd sit a little closer together. But what was noticeable, so we're using this data here, back weight off the ground, the bottom one here is the toe strike. So that's brought that average spin down a certain amount, but it's taken 800 revs of spin off. So we've dropped ball speed, but the toe strike has got that spin down. Whereas for the forward weight, sorry to scroll through that, I'll take the fat one off that I hit earlier, because that doesn't really help anyone with the data. What we can see here is that the slightly lower strikes on the face spin very, very similarly to the one with the weight back. The one I hit well, the last one there, the spin there is like the toe strike with the weight back. So we can see the spin differential is actually very similar, but good hit weight back is like a thin weight forward. Toe strike weight back is like a solid hit weight forward. So that kind of really shows where you've got that 600 odd rev difference between a center strike, but you've also got a degree and a bit launch angle difference. So that kind of shows 1 out of 3 getting it really right versus 2 out of 3, not considering the fat, 2 out of 3 getting it really right with weight back, just shows the playability difference between the two weight positions. So if you're prioritizing this, if you're got one / getting one and you're prioritizing off the fairway, you might want to consider putting that weight back, or you should consider putting that weight back for forgiveness. If it's an off the tee club, shift that weight forward, pound it out there and get that little bit more yardage. So I hope you like the video on this. It's quite a particular club. No one else is talking about these as a 2-wood, and coincidentally, if there are any questions you've got about the data or what the strike points did or any of that, then just put them in the comments. I'll always do my best to answer them as quickly as possible. Sometimes can take a little bit longer than others when we're busy in the studio, but I will always try and get back to you at some point over the coming weeks. But put the questions in there. If you like this, hit the subscribe button, check out the other videos. There's plenty more coming with the new products, but this 280, really interesting product. And if you can get your hands on one, I think you might do well with it.